Hi, sit down. Let me introduce you to three of my shadows, or as I like to call them, dragons. First, we have Aurelius, who's the part of me that wants to be virtuous, purposeful, and always growing. This can be great when it gets me to record videos like this one you're watching right now, writing articles, and journaling every night, working towards my true self. But it can also be trouble when he projects that growth hunger onto others. It's one of the main reasons that my ex and I broke up. She was growing at her own pace, in her own direction, and Aurelius found it too slow. Looking back, this was for the better, but a lot of that pain in the relationship could have been navigated if Aurelius wasn't so strict. Then we have Groovy, who's the part of me that wants to have some fun, to vibe, to just be. Groovy helps me consciously relax, like playing Slay the Spire 2 with my friend John. Problems come, though, when Groovy gets horrifically drunk, like during this one party where I had to sleep on my friend's bed because I couldn't even walk back to my apartment. Thankfully, I haven't drank in 6 months, alcohol at least. Unfortunately, making spiritual content on YouTube does not negate you from having to drink water. So, gotta keep doing that. Then the third dragon is Curia, who's the part of me that's curious about ideas, frameworks, and meta models that I'll literally spend 4 hours on a Tuesday night learning about. She's the one who created some of my meta models like spiral knowing, the truth compass, and the meta hexagon. But the problems come when that intellectualizing becomes the end product and nothing actually gets put in place. Or I forget to realize where the person that I'm teaching is at, and I try and skyrocket them to the highest levels of complexity right away. Before I became aware of these shadows and dragons, they quietly and not so quietly ran my college life. And here's the thing, you won't find a shadow work or a psychology work through journaling class almost anywhere. I was a psych major at Cornell, and in most of my classes, we didn't venture into ourselves. We looked at our psychology the way a person scared of snakes looked at them through like a 1 foot glass, solid glass door. Shadow work is what ensures that the valuable stuff we learn throughout college isn't smogged by the parts of ourselves we can't see. Without it, college feels like this chaotic tug between different parts of ourselves with none of them able to merge, to integrate together. Over my 4 years at Cornell, shadow work helped me navigate a productivity addiction, romantic relationship struggles, and find my life purpose helping reform education. In this video, I hope to help you do the same. This summarizes my insights from 500 plus books, from 1,500 journal entries, and talking to 50 college freshmen about this specific topic. We're going to explore what the shadow is, why it even exists, and how we can use journaling as a practice to navigate it. So, with that being said, what is the shadow? We like to think of ourselves as one person, one coherent identity walking around campus with a backpack, a coffee, and the quiet confidence of someone who definitely did the reading. We did not do the reading. That's a comfortable story, but it's mostly fiction. As Richard Schwartz explores in his book, No Bad Parts, we're made of a myriad of different parts, each with their own desires and beliefs about what's good for us, like Aurelius, like Curia, like Groovy. Some of these parts we know well, like the high achiever, the loyal friend, the nervous test taker. But others work deep in our subconscious, and we only realize that they've been acting on us years down the line. The shadow is made of parts of ourselves that we've attached to through addiction or allergy, often without realizing it. A shadow addiction means we're so fused with a part, so tied to it that we can't see how it's running the show. Think about someone who stays constantly stimulated, earbuds in, watching a podcast, listening to a podcast, but they're secretly underneath avoiding the stillness that will surface the grief or loneliness of the creeping sense that life is not aligned. And the stimulation is actually helping them avoid that. It's doing its job. The problem is that its job description was written during a crisis that occurred years ago. Then we have a shadow allergy, which is where we're so avoidant of a part of ourselves that it starts shaping our choices. Maybe we're allergic to Donald Trump, for example. We talk about how terrible he is with family and friends and bond over the shared outrage of belittling this man. The allergy is keeping us feeling like good people, spreading a message we believe in. And don't get me wrong, I've definitely joined in this game a number of times. But what's hiding is the uncomfortable possibility that Trump's selfishness, his attention seeking, his need for control might be a projection of something that we are not looking at in ourselves. This next point is essential. Come to shadows with extreme compassion and extreme love. They're not good or bad. It's a part of ourself trying to help us in its own way, profoundly affecting our lives in the process. These shadows, they don't just create emotions, they shape our motivations, what we find true, what we notice, and what we literally cannot perceive. They shape our entire judgment of reality. Here's the analogy that I keep coming back to in order to describe that. The shadow is a dragon protecting a treasure. I like this analogy for 3 reasons. Firstly, it's a freaking dragon, all right? I mean, how cool is that? I am great at coming up with analogies, I know. Second, we tend to see our shadows as inherently bad. Oh no, the big bad dragon that's ruining our lives. But that's not the relationship that we want to have with our shadows. We want to befriend them, not to belittle them. And third, the dragon is rarely the deepest layer. Just as a dragon's carnage burns houses down and breaks trees and sets things on fire, we see that as the external carnage, but really that is being led by the dragon protecting a treasure. There is an internal aspect that roots all of the dragon's actions. And here's what makes it messier. The shadow is rarely one dragon. Most of our suffering comes from multiple dragons fighting each other, each protecting a different treasure. Each one believes if I stop, then you won't survive. Aurelius and Groovy are at war constantly. One screams grow while the other whispers rest, and I'm the battlefield where their fire meets. So we know that dragons we know what they are, but why do they exist in the first place? Because if we can understand why they're here, then we can understand better how we can use journaling as a practice to navigate them. Why do dragons exist? The short answer is dragons exist to survive the self. The false self is the finite character that we create throughout college in order to navigate it. It's often made of our body, our achievements, our interests, our relationships, and we call it me. Everything else becomes other. When mistaken for our true self, the false self creates a foundation for success, happiness, and love that's built on toothpicks. And self-survival is the process through which that false self keeps recreating itself. Here's the thing that most people miss. We don't just survive physically anymore. We survive psychologically. Think about it. Debating our conservatives about abortion survives a liberal identity. Buying jewelry or a video game for a friend survives the kindness identity you have. It survives that friendship. Watching Pursuit of Wonder, Healthy Gamer GG, Exerbia, Kurzgesagt, or even watching me is surviving an identity. Your entire personality might be a survival strategy. Sit with that for a second. Let it land in the chest, not just the head. And it's essential that you don't see this as an attack on yourself. Surviving the false self is not inherently bad. So much of it helps us do wonderful things like grow relationships, pursue a purposeful career, and work on spirituality. It's when you mistake it for what Stephen Cope in Yoga and the True Self calls the true self that you create all sorts of suffering across your life. So false selves survive, and shadows are in main way a way of that false self surviving. But it's not just an individual matter. False selves and shadows live in entire groups collectively. They live in friend groups, in Greek life, in department cultures, entire campus climates. The collective self-survival is a major exploration of what I look at in my videos on the stages of college freshman ego development. So check that out above if you're curious. The mycelium of this collective shadow runs underneath every single institution we walk through. One student's anxiety about grades sends a signal through the network, and suddenly everyone in the study group is tense without knowing why. We see it when humanities students sit at the other end of the dining hall from STEM students, like they're rival medieval kingdoms. When a country survives its culture through laws and holidays and that calcify once the living tradition is no longer allowed to be questioned. And it's not 100% our fault for having the shadows we do, or the collective's fault. We inherited a lot of them the same way that we inherited eye color before we had any say in the matter. So again, our dragons are trying to help us, even the ones breathing fire in directions we wish they wouldn't. Come at them with compassion and love, because that's what we're about to explore, is how they got here in the first place. Dragons form through difficult experiences, especially experiences without reflection. The pain happens, and because no one helped us process it, it crystallizes and hardens inside of our body. And often, it starts really early as a response to primary caregivers, but college is also a dragon factory, trust me. Sometimes the dragon strategy is actually appropriate for the current context. A shadow that biases against trusting people could be genuinely helpful if you're in an environment where you can't trust people. The problem arrives when you're no longer in that environment and the shadow continues to bias against trusting people, even though there's perfectly trustable people all around. Dragon creation happens across all stages of development, and the dragons look different depending upon where you are. In my video on the stages of college freshman ego development, I describe the cosmic climber stage. And in that stage, the shadow might be relentless achievement drive, of valuing of meritocracy, of discipline, of masking of fear of worthlessness. Whereas a cosmic weaver's shadow might be well-meaning, but have an overemphasis on LGBTQ politics and emotional intelligence. Not to say those aren't important, but they might have an over-reliance on it. In classes and studies, a dragon might show up as a resistance to an entire field. Maybe we had one terrible humanities experience when we were younger, or one terrible STEM experience. I can definitely say I did. And now we're forever turned off from investing more in those fields because of that experience that we had. But the dragon doesn't see the discipline it didn't hurt us. One person did. And the dragon can't see that nuance. It just sees in black and white. In health, a dragon might look like obsessive body monitoring, or the complete opposite, total disconnection from the body. I was overweight growing up. And once I became insecure about this, I went on this awful anabolic diet where I ate super low calorie, super high protein, and high volume so that I could artificially lower my body weight. And that was in large part propelled through a dragon. In play and joy, a dragon might be making it impossible to consciously relax. If our parents and friends were always pushing us to achieve and playing video games feels like sacrosanct against that, then it'll be really hard for us to just sit down and just be in an activity for the sake of the activity. You can check out my video on conscious relaxation to learn more if that's a struggle. So, one last rich lens for thinking about shadow creation is attachment theory, which maps how our bonds with primary caregivers shape our relational patterns into secure, avoidant, or anxious attachment styles. How we learn to love at one age affects how we love later on. But unfortunately, going more in depth is outside the scope of this video. Just be aware that it exists because it's a rich literature. The point is that our dragons didn't come from nowhere. They came from experiences, especially ones that we didn't reflect on. And knowing that doesn't make them disappear, but it does make them easier to look at in the eye. Which leads us to the question, how can we navigate our dragons? I've created a 3-step process for navigating dragons, and it's a bizarre combination of internal family systems, shadow work, integral practice, and so much more. At this point, I've just accepted that when Curia comes across frameworks, she'll just mold them into a Frankenstein and then go with it. Adding like some pretentiousness and a few radiant stars. You know, if you didn't see the star background, I don't know what to tell you. Of course, I'm going to add some stars to everything I touch. And no, I'm not sponsored by DreamWorks How to Train Your Dragon. Although if anyone there is watching, I'm always fine with some extra cash. So just leave a personal message through email. Anyways, the 3-step process is step 1, finding your dragons. Step 2, understanding your dragons. And step 3, befriending your dragons. So step 1, if this were a fantasy novel, which tangent I would like to write one day, we'd know a dragon was nearby by these signs: burnt villages, scorched forests, terrified folk fleeing in the opposite direction. In our college lives, the trails are a little subtler. I assume there's no burned colleges, and probably for good. They show up as recurring challenges, strong emotional reactions, and patterns that we don't seem to be able to break. All of these are connected to common dragon defenses, things our dragon do to protect the treasure they're guarding. There are many of these defenses, enough for a whole video on its own, but I just wanted to name 3 of the most common from my conversations with college freshmen. See if you can identify any in you. One is projection, when something we're attached to or deny internally gets subconsciously put onto others. Maybe we're addicted to work, so every time we go in the library and we see someone watching shorts on their phone, that makes us judge them as lazy and procrastinating, when it's really us feeling that projection onto them of our own values. Maybe we have displacement, which is taking strong feelings in one context and then expressing them in a safer one. So, for example, getting furious about politics at the dinner table when the real anger is toward a professor who assigned an exam the day after break. That's happened to me a few times. Not cool. And then we have transference, which is when we carry patterns from past relationships and bring them into current ones. So a fear of abandonment as a child transfers into an anxious attachment style or clinginess with a new partner. Some journaling questions that you can ask in order to find your dragons are, where does life feel heavy, avoidant, or compulsive? What can't you stop doing even though you know it's hurting you? What are you avoiding even though you know it deserves your attention? And finally, what dragon defenses do you see coming up throughout your day? The second step, once you've found your dragon, is really understanding it. Often, awareness alone lessens dragon's grip. Dragons, they just want to be seen and loved like the rest of us. And the practice here is self witnessing, which is grounding in the awareness behind all of awareness and watching the dragon from a quiet place. Notice how you are not your emotions, your thoughts, your defenses. You are not your dragons. You are the being which witnesses the dragons acting. Watch them without judgment, without rushing to fix anything. Kind of like watching rain slide down a window, noticing the path it takes without needing to redirect it. Feel your jaw unclenching, your shoulders relax, and your breath expand farther outward. Don't force understanding if the dragon doesn't want to be known yet. There might be too many dragons in conflict with it, and you need to resolve that. Accept the resistance. Feel what resistance feels like in the body. Sometimes the resistance itself is actually the first message. You need to wait, be patient. And sometimes the dragon won't resolve into anything clean. It might just be a confusing amalgam of different emotions and body signals and half memories, and that's okay. Just try to understand as well as you can. Some journaling questions that you can ask in order to do this. What's the dragon's name? How is it manifesting in the body? Where does it stem from? What experience, what age, what version of you first needed it? What does it look like? And most importantly, how is it protecting or trying to help you? The last step is befriending the dragon. Our dragons, they don't have to fight against us or each other. They can join our team and each other's, and we just have to learn how to love them. So what makes a dragon feel loved? Well, much the same things that make us feel loved. Understanding of why it exists and how it affects our life. Appreciation of how it's trying to help, even when the help creates its own kind of damage. And just patience. Some dragons need months of being loved before they'll lower their defenses. Some need years. The timeline is not up to us completely. Some questions that you can ask in order to try and get this to happen faster. How is this dragon trying to help you? Can you find anything to appreciate about its strategy, even the messy parts? Is this dragon ready to grow, or does it need time getting accustomed to being seen? And if it is ready, what new role could it adopt in you, in your inner world? Aurelius, the part of me bent on virtue, on purpose, on growth, spent years of my life running a productivity tyrant. And when I finally sat down with him long enough to feel what he was protecting, I found a kid terrified of going back into video game addiction. He was crunched on the bed, clinging to our favorite childhood series, Del Toro's Quest, like it was a chain keeping him from the computer. And I held him with warmth. And then Aurelius softened. He still pushes me to write, to build, to make videos like this one right now, but the edges are different. He flies alongside my other dragons rather than, well, shooting them with blazing fire. And I won't pretend that the process was quick, clean. Sometimes I wake up with Aurelius and he's already on the controls, planning how to optimize a day that hasn't even started yet. While Groovy is trying to pull me to play Slay the Spire 2, and Curia, meanwhile, has opened 14 browser tabs about attachment theory. All before breakfast, of course. You have your own Aureliuses, Groovies, and Curias, each with their own unique personalities, their own unique way of helping you. And like I did, you might have seen them as the monstrous dragons that they are. I hope this video has shown you there's a different way to treat your dragons. One that doesn't involve a sword, a hero complex, or reading 14 more self-help videos. Although, if you do want to read or watch 14 more, I do have an entire channel called Conscious College. You might have heard of it, and you can check those out. That's it. As always, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And if you like this video on journaling, please check out the free college freshman cosmic journaling kit in the description. It's a gamified journaling system that will help you with growing your emotional intelligence, your shadow understanding, your purpose, with over 1,000 journaling questions in just 15 minutes a day. So check that out in the description below. Have a lovely rest of your day. Eat some peanut butter, and bye-bye.